Hello, my name is Brian Dow. I'm the Chief Executive of Mental Health UK, and we're doing a special podcast in conversation with Alan Milburn. As many of you will know, the issue of young people and work are two issues which are incredibly intrinsically connected. We have a growing number of young people who are struggling to get into work, struggling to stay into work, and Alan has been commissioned by the UK government to do an independent report into what I think you would agree, Alan, is a slightly ugly term, NEET. People are not in employment, education or training. So it's a huge privilege to talk to you about that report, which is being published today. Can I just start there with that issue of what we say when we talk about young people? The myth addresses a couple of the myths, some of the unhelpful narratives that are out there about young people, snowflakes, not willing to try hard. You spoke at length to so many young people. What was your experience?
Well, it's the reverse of that. So look, you sometimes hear it said, they're soft, the snowflakes, they haven't got resilience, they've given up, they don't want to work. Sometimes those things are unfair, often they're cruel, and they're all wrong. They're wrong. So the young people I've spoken to in every part of the country, and we've surveyed young people, talked to young people, had a small team going out to talk to, you're right, it's an ugly term, NEET young people who are not in education, employment and training. That's 16 to 24 year olds, by the way, that's the age range. It's the reverse of that. These are not people who've given up. It's not a shortage of effort that is the problem. It's a shortage of opportunity and it's a shortage of help and support. That is the principal problem that they face, and increasingly, unfortunately, more of them are not in the education system, they're not in the employment system either. So the data is getting worse, it's not getting better. This is a chronic problem. It's been going on for very, very many years. But it's not young people's fault. The young people I've talked to, honestly, you meet them and they are applying sometimes for dozens, sometimes for hundreds of jobs every month. Usually they hear nothing. Literally nothing, no feedback, no response. And it's the silence that kills, because it not only knocks their confidence, but it dents their hopes. And so there's something going on in the labour market that's not right. Young people's employment prospects are lower than they were. And there's something going on in education, skills and welfare, and the health system, of course, that is leading to young people not getting the help and support that they need.
And, as a former health secretary, and social mobility czar, you've seen it from lots of different perspectives. I think one of the things that really strikes me in the report is that you are looking at all of these different factors, both what you call the supply side, how we help young people themselves, give them the skills, the training, but also the demand side, the job market itself.
Yes.
How can we make these two parts work better than they currently are?
Well, they currently don't work together. So, look, 6 in 10 of these young people have never had a job. A generation ago, that was 4 in 10. The proportion of young people who are in education, who were also holding down a job, that was about 4 in 10 20 years ago. It's now 2 in 10, so it's halved. So there's something going on in the labour market, and what seems to be happening is the sort of entry-level job. People talk about the Saturday job. You probably had a Saturday job, I had a Saturday job. So something has happened in the labour market. So jobs have been growing, but not for young people. And that's been going on for decades. So you've got this going on. And then every employer that you talk to, they'll say lots of things about young people, but the principal thing they say, they're not unsympathetic to young people. They want to employ more young people, but they say that the school system isn't making them work ready. So what do they mean by that? They mean, sure, you get your literacy and numeracy and your qualifications, but are young people being set up with the right attributes in order to be able to be successful in the labour market? And that's about collaboration skills, communication skills. Have you got agility? Have you got adaptability? And so those are the things that seem to be what employers are looking for, but what schools are not providing for young people. And when we've surveyed young people who are NEET, teachers and employers, we've done opinion polling of each of these groups, they all say remarkably the same thing, which is the school system's great for getting young people qualifications, it's less good for giving them the skills they need to be successful in the labour market. So we've got to put these two things together, and one of the things that I think is unique about what we're doing with this review is we're looking at it in the round. We're looking at everything from schools, skills, early years, employment support, health, welfare, and we're looking at what's going on in the labour market. And unless you put these two things together, you can fix the supply side, making sure that young people are transported from the world of education into the world of work. But if there's no work for them, it doesn't solve the problem. And that's why we've been working very closely with employers on this.
And speaking of cycles, The report details that, if you like, psychological effect, that continued rejection.
Yes.
You know, you're trying for a job.
Yeah.
You haven't managed to get any skills because you haven't got that first
Yeah.
foot on the rung of the ladder. You're writing to employers. You're not hearing back from employers, and that what effect does all of that have?
So it's completely dispiriting, and it makes young people, I think, believe that they're not as good as they are. Because look, my starting proposition, Brian, is a very simple one. Everybody's got something. You know, everybody's different, but everybody's got something. A young person might have a skill, might have a potential, might have an aptitude, might have an aspiration. Everybody wants to do something. Not one young person that you meet ever wants to be neat. That is not what they aspired to in life, but that's where we've managed to transport them, and we stuck them on the scrap heap. And we know, I mean, you know this better than anybody here at Mental Health UK, you know that, you know, not being in work is a disaster for your health and a disaster for your mental health in particular. And of course, work brings stresses and strains and pressure and all of that sort of thing. But the converse is even more true. And so we've got to be opening up a lot more opportunities for people. I think one of the real tricks is, you know, this generation is different. You know, it's not the same as our generation. They've grown up in different times. They've lived through the pandemic. They're right in the heart and soul of the digital age, and that's different. It just is. They live a lot of their lives on their phones. It's a world of uncertainty, and it's a world that seems to be a world of less opportunity for young people to start a job. So sure, young people are anxious, and sure, there's a level of distress in society or amongst young people that there probably wasn't in our day. And I think the job now for employers is, how do we meet them halfway?
Yeah.
It's no use saying they should be like this. They're like how they are, okay? That's just how it is. And so I think there's a greater pastoral role that employers are going to have to play in the future with this generation of young people than perhaps previous generations. So that's a job for employers, but obviously there's a big question about public policy, about what we do about mental health policy, what we do about welfare policy, what we do about employment support policy. So unless you fix all of these things together, the system is the problem. I mean, the truth is, there isn't really a system. You know, everybody's got some responsibility, but nobody in the end is fully accountable for making sure that every young person, regardless of their background or circumstance, gets the opportunity to learn or to earn.
And just to see, I mean, you talked incredibly powerfully about employers, but to see it from their perspective for a moment, I speak to a lot of employers, both large employers and smaller organisations, and the thing that's pretty constant, and of course Charlie Mayfield talked about this in his report, is that sense of, where does my responsibility stop?
Yeah.
So even if you've made that leap of faith and you're meeting young people where they are, and you understand that they are seeing that social contract with work differently from the way that we might have done, but where is my responsibility? And more to the point, where does it stop? Where's the job for somebody else?
Yeah.
If somebody's suffering from a mental health problem, was that something that you encountered as you went through that process?
Yeah, no, very much so. And it's one of the obvious things that when you look at the system, as I say, it isn't really a system. It's a series of vertical silos. So, you know, employers do a bit, employment support does a bit, education does a bit, local government does a bit, but no one joins the dots. And that's particularly the case in a local labour market, you know, because that's where the rubber hits the road. That's where the so-called matching function of matching young people with potential employment, that's where that's got to happen. But no one in the end is fully responsible for that. And that's a really big problem. And employers are crying out for that. You look, we're living in a world now, you can talk to virtually any employer in any sector, whether it's in hospitality at the bottom end of the labour market, technology at the top end of the labour market, and everybody will say the same thing. The biggest shortage is a shortage of skilled labour. That's the problem that they've got. And now that we've got migration levels coming down in the way that they are, you know, employers are not able to be on easy street anymore, simply recruiting from overseas and bringing in skilled, experienced, you know, high appetite labour. They're going to have to find a different pool of labour. There's 1 million people here, guys. Seriously. So how are we going to interact with them? And how do we set the system up in such a way that it can match the supply with the demand?
So Alan, even though you talk about the system-wide cohesion, or the fact sometimes the lack of system, you also do talk about the fact there are some places where actually the combination of employers, job centres, young people themselves are coming together to actually find solutions. So we don't have to wait to fix everything to do something.
No, we don't. So I think there's a systems problem. And we've got to fix it at a structural level, at an architectural level. We've got to make sure there's clear accountabilities, clear incentives. That all takes time. But you go around the country and you see the most amazing initiatives and programs that people are running. Go to other countries, go to a country like Holland or Germany or Belgium or Denmark, and they're set up in a very different way. So look, young people are no different really in Holland and the UK, are they? But the rate of being NEET is 3 times higher in Holland than it is in the UK. They're doing something different. One of the things that they seem to be doing is they integrate their services better at a local level. They bring them together. We tend to operate like this, vertical silos. They put them together horizontally. Employers are involved much earlier, and particularly in schools, and they're talking to kids from the outset. Things like work experience, you talk to kids here and work experience is often afterthought in school. You're often told, go and sort out your own work experience. Yeah. Well, that's great if you've got connections and you can ring somebody up and they'll get you a great place in an office for a week, but not so good if your family's out of work, hasn't been in work, haven't got those connections. So we've got amongst the worst work experience in the OECD, across the developed world. Mm-hmm. This is a really big problem. So there's something about how we get schools to understand that their job is not just to provide young people with qualifications, but to set them up for the world of work. And that can only be done in collaboration with employers.
It is an unflinching report. It's a remarkably unflinching report. It does not pull its punches about where things have gone wrong. And certainly at Mental Health UK, I always think it's our responsibility to speak truth to power wherever it happens to be. And so actually you do call out some of the bad habits that young people themselves have. Now, you're clear about the fact that they are in part victims of a system, but just talk a little bit about the responsibility young people themselves.
Yes, I think, look, it's not, this problem, look, it's very entrenched, it's very chronic, it's getting worse, and the truth is we don't have a system or a plan to deal with it. And so everybody's got a responsibility, whether that's local government, national government, employers, educators, charities like yours, the media, etc., etc. But there's also a responsibility on parents and young people themselves, there just is, because aspiration isn't something that can be gifted to people. It's got to be something that comes from in here. You've got to want it, sort of thing. Now, my sense is that overwhelmingly that's what young people want. So when we polled young people, 84% of them said they wanted to be in work or training. A very small minority don't, in truth. So that's a great thing. That is really, really good. But there is something about young people themselves. The team that I've had going around the country talking to young people about their lives and sort of trying to understand what's been going on, they do this quite interesting exercise. They go around the group of young people who are NEET and they ask them a very simple question. What time did you go to sleep last night? 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock, sometimes never. Okay, and what do people do? They're on this thing, they're on the phones, of course, which is sort of understandable, and of course, you can say people are victims of that. But then, if you're going to go into work, a bit like my experience as a 13 or 14-year-old in the West End of Newcastle, if you can't go out of bed, you won't be in work. So that's where there's got to be a deal. Societies like ours, they're built on contracts, aren't they? That's how it works. The state does its bit, employers do their bit, but communities, parents and young people have got to do their bit, and that is just the nature of society. Otherwise you just have anarchy. And so I think there's a deal with employers to be done. I think there's a deal with young people to be done. We've got to massively improve the opportunities and the support for them, but then they've got to grab those opportunities. So, that might sound a bit old-fashioned, but honestly, I think that's what most people in the country want to see.
Couldn't agree more. So this is the diagnosis. Why is it happening and how is it happening? We'll come to the solutions in due course.
Yes.
So without getting ahead of ourselves, I suppose from your perspective, we're sitting here in 5 years' time, and that social contract, which is under huge pressure at the moment with young people, how will things be different?
So I think, first of all, that our society will have made a choice, okay? And for me, the choice has got to be the next generation. Yeah. Britain relies on the next generation. This is an ageing society. It's my age, probably.
Hope you're not pointing at me.
Yeah, well, I'm pointing myself. My age. And so, look, we can't afford, as society gets older and there are fewer workers, we can't afford to have more and more young people who are not in education, employment and training. My future rests on their future. So this is a symbiotic thing. So I hope that what we have done as a society and what politics has done is made the choice, which is for the next generation, to make sure that they are the priority, to make sure that they get the support and the opportunities that they need. And the nature of the conversation that we're having in 5 years' time is a different one from now. Because right now, it feels like almost as a country we're sort of in managed decline, and young people are the victims of that. And young people, arguably, in this generation, are the first one, maybe for 100 years, who feel like they're not going to be better off than their parents' generation. And that happens to be true. So this is a visceral thing. And as I've gone around the country talking to people, you come across this concern, it's bordering on a fear that parents and grandparents have, that the old social contract, which is each generation would do better than the next, that contract for this generation is being broken. And the young people who are NEET, 1 million of them, they're on the front line of that broken contract. In 5 years' time, I hope that we've repaired the contract. I hope that we've reformed the contract. I hope that we reset the relationship between employers and the state and young people such that we feel that we're not in managed decline, but we're in managed ascent as a country.
Fantastic. Well, it's been a huge pleasure listening to your analysis, and I really look forward to the solution when you get to that stage. I think, like you, we see it as a national endeavour. It's not just the job of government, it's not just the job of young people, it's employers, it's charities, it's all of us, and I think we all want to play our part in that. So I hope the report lands as well as it should, and I really look forward to working with you on trying to scope up some of the solutions.
No, we absolutely will. Thank you for your support.
Thank you.